Kira Romero Craft, and we're delighted to have you join us to discuss the settlement agreement and our litigation against the 32 supervisors of elections of the state of Florida. This story starts in the spring of 2018, where myself and my amazing colleague, Stuart Nafee, started to hear calls from community organizations that were serving the Puerto Rican community that is quite large already in Central Florida and beyond in the state. But after Hurricane Maria and other issues related to the island, the financial crisis, we heard from community members talking about the fact that Puerto Ricans were not just coming to the more metropolitan areas where they had already been long-term residents in the state of Florida, but were moving, like it is the trend across the United States, to other parts, more rural parts of the state. And so along with Demos, we started a campaign to start to talk to the supervisors of elections about their requirements under the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Section 4E, which requires that any Puerto Rican who is educated on the island has the right to ask for and receive Spanish language materials as well as assistance whenever they go to vote. And so we started the conversations, we sent letters, we asked for time during their conferences and were turned away. And the cries of the community to have their rights fully supported became such that we did file litigation in the fall of 2018. Fortunately, we were granted a preliminary injunction at that time. And the case has, as you all know, it's settled today as against the 31 supervisors of elections. The Secretary of State was dismissed from the case a little later, a few months ago last year. But we are delighted in terms of the settlement agreement that are in place for the next 10 years. And give all thanks to our lead plaintiff, Ms. Marta Rivera Madera, for coming forward and giving a face to all of those voters who do need the assistance, that do require Spanish language materials, and to enforce the Voting Rights Act, as well as the amazing organizational plaintiffs that also form part of this lawsuit. We'd like to thank Faith in Florida Hispanic Federation, Mi Familia Vota, Unidos US, and Vamos for Puerto Rico, that were the amazing organizational plaintiffs that worked alongside the community members, the affected voters, to also give voice to the voters who need and require this assistance. And our fantastic legal team, Demos, represented here by their fearless leader, Stuart Nafee, as well as Altshuler Berzon, amazing law firm. We couldn't do this work without them. And I would be remiss to say what a fantastic legal team that we had. And we appreciate also the efforts of all of the supervisors of elections who worked diligently to reach compliance after the preliminary injunction order, but then worked with community members and made sure that they were doing what they're required to do in order to reach full compliance with the Voting Rights Act. So now it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce Yanitzi Velez from the Hispanic Federation. Yanitzi?
Thank you, Kira, and thank you for everyone who has joined us today. As Kira has mentioned, this coalition has been leading this issue for many years now, because it is important for our community to be empowered and to have their rights secured, and make sure that everyone knows their rights, and more important, that the state also honors their rights. With that said, I want to say that I'm the Florida and Southeast Director for Hispanic Federation. Hispanic Federation is a Latino nonprofit national organization that also have offices in Puerto Rico. And at the same time that we are helping Puerto Rico to really navigate the challenging times since Hurricane Maria 3 years ago, we need to understand that through our programs, and not only we serve the Puerto Ricans in the island, but also those who are coming to the mainland. Thousands of Puerto Ricans, understandable, fled to Florida after the hurricanes and earthquake. And we obviously, as Hispanic Federation, we will continue to help the island to recover, but also to advocate for these climate refugees and other Puerto Ricans who has entitled their rights to be of American citizens. This settlement sends a clear message. We know that the Constitution and the laws of this nation protect, but needs to protect this American citizen, U.S. citizens, regardless the language they speak. I personally think that we should focus on those elements, mostly because we have seen in the state of Florida how this thousands of individuals, 300,000 families have come to the Florida state looking for new opportunities. And like I mentioned before, they not only have been climate refugees, but also now they're part of the economic and the development of this state. They contribute to the better future of this state. And they have rights, they also have responsibilities. And why not to protect them, to make sure that their voices are here in the democratic process, specifically on the voter registration and get out to vote, and more important, to cast their ballots in the language that they feel more comfortable, that they can understand and make a final a judgment on how they want to cast their ballots. For that, we are here more than ever committed to continue with this project, and more important, we are happy of the settlement, and we want to continue to work with the Latino Justice and the great team that he has led this effort for our community. Kira, back to you.
Thank you very much, Aniti, and thank you for all of the efforts that the Hispanic Federation has done on behalf of our communities. And now I have the pleasure to introduce Stuart Nafee from Demos.
Thanks, Kira, and thank you all for coming today. And thanks also, as I must thank all of our partners in the community for supporting this litigation. Until we brought this lawsuit, vast parts of Florida still ran English-only elections. And we were very pleased when the Secretary of State it initiated the rulemaking that led to a requirement for Spanish language ballots throughout the state. And we were especially pleased when the counties that were parties to this lawsuit entered into settlement discussions with us to secure robust Spanish language materials and assistance for all elections in their counties. The right to vote is an empty right if you can't vote in a language you understand. And we're very pleased with the settlement that was reached in the last week, that it brings us a little closer to our democratic ideals and make sure that Puerto Ricans and other Spanish speakers in Florida can exercise the right to vote in the language that they're strongest in. And I will now pass it to, do we have someone from Mi Familia Vota on?
That is what I was checking, and I don't see the name. Is anyone from Mi Familia Vota on? I don't think so, but I will take the moment to thank them and their amazing organizing efforts. They've been contributing partners to a lot of the work that we do, and specifically around this issue. Again, Hispanic Federation, Mi Familia Vota, and I think Unidos US. Eliana, I just wanted to check with you if they were going to be on.
They did not reply, but I would ask the floor if anybody from the organization is here.
Is anyone here from Unidos US? I don't see a familiar name from their organization, but again, thanks Unidos US as well for being an incredible partner and doing a lot of the work in the counties that were covered by this settlement agreement. And I want to, before I introduce our next speaker, take an opportunity to quickly go over what the settlement agreement actually results in terms of for Spanish language dominant Florida voter, which is they now, the rulemaking resulted in, for the first time ever, which is historic, that the entire state of Florida is now required to provide Spanish language ballots in every single county. And that exceeds the terms of the settlement. However, in addition, the counties that are now bound by the settlement agreement, the 31 counties, are now also required to provide Spanish language election materials, the form to request a vote by mail ballots, the secrecy envelopes, and instructions, website translation in Spanish, as well as signs in the main supervisor's offices, as well as the branch offices, and as well as a hotline that if they don't have a bilingual staff member available, then they will have access to a translating option in form of a hotline, which has worked very well for different organizations, businesses, as well as law firms that need that service. So it's really a robust foundation to serve and the requirements of the Voting Rights Act, but that doesn't mean that the supervisors can't go above and beyond this. But so we're very pleased with the results of the settlement agreement. And now it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce our lead plaintiff for the first time. She's participating in a press conference, Marta Rivera Madera. She is our lead plaintiff. She currently resides in Alachua County, but is here in Central Florida. Y señora Marta, ahora le damos a usted la oportunidad si quiere dar unos comentarios, por favor.
Sí, un momentito. I just wanted to clarify that we have a translator who is going to be translating Marta's remarks after she speaks.
Thank you, Elian. Señora Marta.
Ajá, buenas tardes a todos y gracias por tenerme en cuenta en esta petición.
¿No quiere decir un poquito más? ¿Tiene un poquito más de tiempo, señora?
Sí, pues yo estoy complacida, también estoy complacida por la decisión sobre la demanda para que las papeletas fueran en español. Eso nos ayuda bastante a nosotros los latinos que no sabemos inglés y no tenemos que llevar a nadie que nos acompañe mientras vamos a votar, sino que lo podemos hacer nosotros mismos sin ayuda de nadie, que creo que es una mejor decisión.
Muchísimas gracias, señora Marta. Y ahora le vamos a dar un momento para que la señorita Saraí pueda traducir su comentario. Muchísimas gracias. Y estamos muy agradecidos a usted hoy y siempre.
Gracias a ustedes.
Saraí, go ahead, please. She looks like she's frozen.
I think she is frozen.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Do you want me to start from the beginning?
Yes,
please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me.
She's getting frozen again.
Frozen.
Sarai, why don't you turn off your camera and just use the audio, because that usually makes it go faster.
My name is we will not have to rely any longer on anyone to translate our ballots. And I think it's great that we are now going to be capable of doing this ourselves. Señora Rivera, ¿quiere añadir algo más?
Bueno, que yo vine desde Puerto Rico desde octubre del 2017, después del huracán María. Vine porque pues pasaron muchas cosas, se mojó todo mi mobiliario, se me dañaron, y además por mi salud, porque yo soy diabética y mis medicamentos estaban escasos. En Puerto Rico se me dañaba no había luz, no había agua y no tenía dónde guardar mis medicamentos. Mis hijos tomaron la decisión de enviarme para acá, para Florida, donde vive mi hija María. Y desde ese tiempo estoy aquí en Gainesville. Sí, me gusta donde yo vivo porque es tranquilo. Y aunque todo es en inglés, pero que pues uno tiene sus amistades latinas y habla. Además estoy estudiando en Santa Fe College. Estoy estudiando desde el 2018 ahí, tratando, en medio de mi edad, que ya tengo 73 años, pero hay que hacerlo. Hay que mantenerse uno, activo.
Perfecto. So I had to come here after Hurricane Maria. Due to the hurricane, my home was damaged due to, of course, water damage. Therefore, I decided to come to Florida, not only because of that, but I also had health issues. I am diabetic, and there was no medicine for me then. And that is why I decided to then come live with my daughter, Maria. And since then, I've been living, we were living in Gainesville. And since then, I obviously have interacted more in the community, and I have friends, and I am actually even studying here. So I'm happy to be a part of the community.
Muchísimas gracias, señora Marta Rivera Madera. Muchas gracias por relatar su historia. La historia de usted representa a muchas personas que vinieron a Florida y a los Estados Unidos después de Huracán María. I just want to share with everyone who's listening that we're sharing our appreciation. She represents all of the voters and people who came after Hurricane Maria to Florida, to other parts of the United States. And so she gives face to all of those folks who came here seeking for a better life in her circumstance. And so we really thank her for taking this brave step to represent the voters specifically of the state of Florida and make true the Voting Rights Act on behalf of Puerto Rican voters. And now I want to thank everyone for joining us today, for participating in this call. I want to thank, this has been a long lawsuit, but we are very grateful to the community who supported us every step of the way. We're grateful again to Altrula Berzon, to Demos, for all of their work and hard efforts in getting this right. And again, are looking forward to continuing to work. It is not a static sort of proposition, this settlement agreement. It's something that you work towards. A lot of what we do is education, not only on voter education, but the folks that serve the community. In most cases, they are very well intentioned, but I think what is lost in this is what we see in terms of discrimination against language minority groups and folks who need assistance when they go and try to register to vote for the first time. This isn't something that happens automatically, magically because of a settlement agreement. It's something that takes time and is a process. So folks may think, well, why do you need the 10 years? Well, it's most definitely going to take longer than that. For anyone who knows the Florida landscape, these places that we're speaking of are places where they may have, this is the diversity that they may have never seen before. And so this is a good first step to sort of reach that equality that we're all working towards. So thank you all very much. And I think now we're open for questions. I don't know if we're gonna have them in the chat or if we're gonna just, if anyone wants to chime in.
The people can just unmute themselves if they have a question.
Hi, this is Gary Fineout. I'd like to ask a quick question. I just wanted to make sure I'm looking at it correctly. So Judge Walker signed off on the motion to dismiss. I saw that that's in the file today, but he says he's not enforcing the settlement, that he does not intend to oversee this. But I guess you all feel confident that the arrangement that you've reached with everyone, that all of this is going to go as planned. I just want to kind of understand how that's going to work.
This is Stuart Nafee from Demos. I think if I understand the question correctly, I think, if the counties that are party to the settlement don't satisfy their obligations under the settlement, we can, a settlement is a contract, so it can be enforced just like any contract. It also wouldn't prevent us from bringing another lawsuit under the Voting Rights Act if they violate the Voting Rights Act in the future. So there are methods to enforce it, but we also are confident that all the parties to the settlement do intend to fully comply.
Thank you. And just as a little bit of backup for that, we did, to the extent possible, conduct what we call election protection work. Our team here in Florida and went to these counties and interacted with Spanish language dominant voters. And for the most part, we had responses back that these supervisors were in compliance. And this was, this was all throughout the time that we were, that we had the preliminary injunction order. So we fully anticipate to continue those activities to make sure that the voters are receiving the materials and the assistance they need. But thank you for that question. Does anyone else have any, or Gary, do you have a follow-up question, or anyone else have any additional question?
I do have a follow-up if I could ask. Yeah,
Sure.
Could you, I haven't had a chance to fully digest the settlement. So because obviously you got preliminary injunctions and you were able to do things in the last 2 elections. If you could just quickly walk through how much of a difference will it be going forward versus what you've been able to do the last couple of elections?
No, thank you. I think that's a great question. I'll absolutely give time to Stuart to talk as well, and anyone else on the team who would like to talk, especially the folks that do the organizing with the voters on the grounds. But I think in terms of this, one of the biggest challenges that we have and why we're so appreciative of your interest is really getting the word out to the affected communities. I think one of the challenges that we have is that especially for folks that are newly arrived, that don't really know the communities. And if you're talking about a county where there isn't such a large presence of a Latino community, sometimes some of the local stations don't have an affiliate Spanish language option for these folks. And so it's really getting the word out so that folks know that they have the option to ask for this. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have, because we want to make sure that the folks that need this know that is an option. And I'll give you an example. When we first started looking at the possibility of having to file a lawsuit when our calls went unheeded, we did speak to a voter in one of the counties, the 32 counties, and he said, when he was a longtime Orange County resident, moved to one of these counties, and when he went to go register to vote, they said, sorry, we don't speak your language, and sent him home. And at first he thought he had to wait, and he waited for some time and no one helped him. And so a lot of times what happens is that we don't, if we can't get to the community, then they're not going to know that this is an option. And then on the other side, I think one of the big things to take away from this is to look at the importance of the state of Florida, but then how the messaging gets to Spanish language dominant voters. And I think this provides a perfect vehicle, to talk to the folks. We're a nonpartisan organization, but hopefully the folks that have a great vested interest in this, that they understand now what this means in terms of their messaging, and that voters are able to access the information so that they can go in and make an informed vote and cast their confidential ballot. Stuart, I don't know if anyone else would like to answer Gary's question.
I could add that from, like you mentioned, Kira, from the standpoint of a nonpartisan organization that obviously also do a lot of groundwork, specifically working with the community throughout electoral year, we understand how important it is. Like Kira mentioned, not only the Puerto Rican who has come since the Hurricane Maria, we continue to see increasing numbers of people coming from the island, or people who had just became new citizens, new US citizens, and still their main language is not English. So when we see that a potential voter is eager to learn more about the process, what we're trying to do here is to take barriers for them to really feel free to involve in this process. We know that people have to register to vote. We also know that the ballots sometimes are very extensive and the translation is not very accurate, or the language is complicated, let's put it that way, for people who are just voting for the very, very first time here in the States. So having this tool and let people know that is their right to actually request a ballot in Spanish, or get service, a customer service in Spanish, it's a great deal of benefit for every voter who is a USA voter. So there is a lot to gain on this. Even though the relationship with the supervision election of every state is different, we know that out of good faith, this should be in the best interest of everyone, not only the community, but everyone also who works in the supervisory election, to do their best to really provide the tools for their community to be more active in the electoral process.
Gary,
Yes.
thanks for your follow-up question. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions.
Yes, me. I'm Jose Delgado from El Nuevo Dia. I want to clarify something. The settlement is with 32 counties. How this apply to the whole state?
Thank you so much, Jose Delgado. It actually applies to 31 counties.
Okay.
We had Charlotte County who did not join in on the settlement agreement. So in terms of the other counties, so we have the 31 counties that are now have agreed to the settlement agreement. In addition to, there are 13 counties that are covered under Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, and they have come into compliance under different years, but they are also held to the same standards. There are some minor differences, but the counties that fall outside of that, if my math is correct, there are 44 counties. So please correct me. I think we have 23 now counties that are not under some sort of under a requirement. They are still under the requirement. Let me be clear. The counties that are not under the settlement agreement are still required under the Voting Rights Act to provide a Spanish language dominant voter who has been educated in Puerto Rico the materials that they request. If they request the election materials, if they request assistance. However, if they do not, then they may, they may be vulnerable, I would say, if they're not complying with the Voting Rights Act. But however, one of the most important things to remember is that the rule change that the Secretary of State did complete last year, that requires all Florida counties to, at the very minimum, have a Spanish language ballot available for voters. So those counties that are not part of the Section 203, 13 counties, these 31 counties, they do have to provide a Spanish language material ballot if the voter requests it. Stuart, I don't know if there's anything else or anyone else on the team who wants to answer that question. Jose, was that?
So I can say that these are the 31 counties that were
Yes.
not complying with the law.
Yes, these 31 counties are now parties. They are part of the settlement agreement, and they're promising to do what's in the settlement agreement, which is the ballots, election materials, the vote by mail forms, the secrecy envelopes, instructions, website translations, and the signs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I can just, by way of explanation, so the 32, there were 32 counties originally part of the lawsuit that we sued, or that we named in the lawsuit as defendants. We identified them because they have, according to the census, they had Puerto Rican residents and they were operating English only elections. They had substantial Puerto Rican populations, or, the size of the populations varied a lot from county to county, but they all had this, Puerto Rican populations of sufficient size that we determined they should be complying with Section 4E of the Voting Rights Act. So that's how the 32 counties were identified, and none of them were offering much, if anything, in the way of Spanish language materials when we brought the lawsuit.
Hi, this is Bianca from the Herald. I just had a follow-up question about that. So is Charlotte County not, what does this mean for them if they didn't join the settlement? And I just had another question. I missed the first few minutes, so apologies if it's repetitive, but why did the parties decide to settle in this case?
I don't know, Stuart, if you wanted to speak to those, or I can speak to those, but I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'd love to cede the floor to you.
Well, in terms of why, I may need you to repeat the first part of your question. In terms of the second part, as Kira mentioned, we have been monitoring compliance with the preliminary injunction that has been in place since, originally there was an injunction in place in 2018. It was expanded in 2019 and has been in effect for all elections, state, local, and federal, in the intervening period. And we've been monitoring compliance with that and have determined that, you know, the counties are largely in compliance. The counties were willing to commit to continuing to stay in compliance with the requirements of the Voting Rights Act and well, essentially of the terms of the injunction, although the injunction itself is no longer in place. And so we decided that there was no point in continuing to litigate the case if we could all come to an agreement. And then can you remind me what was the first part of your question?
Sure. The first part was regarding Charlotte County.
Oh, Charlotte County, yes. So Charlotte County, unfortunately, decided that they don't want to have any part of any settlement, which leaves them vulnerable to additional litigation, which, you know, if we or other members of the community determine we need it, we will bring it without hesitation. In the meantime, Charlotte County is, you know, subject to the regulations that the Secretary of State issued that apply statewide. So they are still going to be providing Spanish language materials that those regulations require. And, you know, we will keep an eye on Charlotte County.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Bianca. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Again, we want to thank you. I want to thank my partner too, Miranda Galindo, from our litigation team. I want to thank everyone for being part of this. And if you have any follow-up questions or requests, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, Gary. I'm hoping that we will see the importance increase as you know, we have elections in Florida every year. But we are very grateful to you all, and here from Latino Justice, this is part of our history. And in 2022, we'll be celebrating our 50-year anniversary. And in 1972, when we started, it was a lawsuit. It was a case specifically around these types of issues, voting rights, language access on behalf of Puerto Rican voters. And that extends obviously out to Spanish language dominant voters. So this is very much at the core of what we do. So we're happy to continue this fight, the good fight on behalf of all voters. So thank you all so much. Enjoy your day, and we look forward to talking again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Just a little,
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, everyone.
a little housekeeping. I'm gonna be sending this recording for those of you that came out a little late. So I'll be sending that on email.
Okay, thank you so much, Elian. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.